This is Rosen Institute's Your Law Firm, where Ned Days and Lee Rosen cover management, marketing, finance, and new technologies for building the practice you deserve. Rosen Institute members received this episode early, as well as exclusive segments on whether or not your credit card merchant fees are worth re-examining, and an answer to a member question about dealing with the departure of a critical team member. Get access to everything you're missing at roseninstitute.com/join. Here's Ned Days.
It's time for your tech tip. I have a vivid memory from childhood of a ratty t-shirt my dad used to wear on weekends. It was a cartoon of William Shakespeare as Superman. Why, yes, he was an English major. How could you tell? But alas, since becoming a poet was unlikely to pay the bills, he settled for becoming an attorney. No judgment, you may be able to sympathize. I retained very little about English grammar from the constant corrections he made to my speech as a child. In fact, about the only thing I remember is the difference between less and fewer, which I now use to correct my wife, something she seems to thoroughly appreciate every time I do it. We've written lots of stuff at Rosen Institute over the years, thousands of blog posts and emails, to say nothing of all the member programs. And believe it or not, we actually employed the skills of an editor for quite some time. Our editor was also an English major, and the one thing I learned from the edits, not that anything I write really needs editing, I mean, come on, this stuff is gold, was about M-dashes. Not what they signify or when to use them or anything like that. I learned that I don't like them. Partially because I couldn't really figure out how to type them on my keyboard, but primarily because I don't like the way they look. They touch the words on either end, which is kind of creepy. They're just a bit too long. I think joining sentence fragments with a good old-fashioned minus sign that has a space on either side is a lot more aesthetically pleasing, if perhaps grammatically incorrect. Although this is coming from someone who, as a child, wouldn't eat the last bite of a hot dog because the end was gross. I apparently had no problem eating the side my fevered brain construed as the face of the hot dog, but the end I arbitrarily decided was the disgusting hot dog cloaca was a step too far. So it's possible I am just an insane person, but insane or not, I tolerated the M-dash. I learned to live with it. This was all fine until about 2023, when ChatGPT usage really started to boom and everybody was using it willy-nilly to draft everything from email replies to website content to erotic fan fiction they were self-publishing on Amazon. And something that eagle-eyed readers and AI skeptics started to notice was that just like a pedantic English major, these LLM tools loved using M-dashes. The M-dash became a telltale sign of AI-generated content, because what human would even know what an M-dash is? And I started to panic. What if somebody just coming across our content thought this was just a bunch of AI-generated slop, when in fact it was lovingly handcrafted human slop of the highest caliber? I'm having a hard time condensing and firming up the ideas I am going for here, but I think my general thesis is that we are in a transition period where a new technology is dramatically changing how we do a lot of things, specifically communicate. And there is an unease about how much of itself the tool is leaving on what we create, especially the output that until now has been inextricably tied with our personalities and expertise and insight. Every technology leaves tool marks, whether it is a chisel or router bit on a piece of stone or wood, goofy clip art on a PowerPoint presentation, or even computer data structures on the way we think. We often work through ideas in our heads based on how we are expecting to have to present them to a software interface of some kind, whether it is a web app front end to a database, a collection of word processing documents, or an AI coding tool. And I think a lot of us are wrestling with the implications this has going forward. I don't have a particularly comprehensive solution, and frankly, things are moving so quickly, I don't know that one is possible. I do, however, think that the concept of having style guides for personal writing, for professional writing, legal drafting, and the like are a good starting point and a useful way to get experience tweaking the output of the tools available to more closely match what we are after, if for no other reason than to make us more comfortable with the output of LLMs. Claude has a useful style feature that walks you through creating and modifying different writing styles that you can apply to its output. It's handy, but it's something you can do with any LLM. At the end of the day, it is just a set of instructions in plain text on style cues, language preferences, and examples of previous writing. I have been working on a personal style guide for copywriting based on examples I gave it and based on corrections I make to output it gives. I let it draft something, I make corrections, I tell it to look at what I did versus what it gave me and make updates to the style guide. It's not perfect, but it's improving. Getting exact language and clauses for drafting is a different kettle of fish, but outlining goals and strategy and preferences for organization and language and structure for a kind of firm-wide style guide makes a lot of sense. I think having something like this for branding guidelines for firms is worth working on too. Boilerplate about the values and vision and taglines and phrases you use across your marketing. It's going to sound generic at first, but this is a work in progress, and as you refine it and as the models improve, the results are going to get better and better. As AI workflows around software development get pushed downward toward consumers with easier-to-use interfaces like Claude Cowork or Copilot Cowork, I think we are going to start to see and use a more code-like approach in how we structure our projects. Instead of copying and pasting prompts or dumping a bunch of stuff into a project, we'll have version-controlled folder structures for all kinds of tools and workflows and documents, and having a ready-made style guide as part of that template will be really powerful. For right now, though, the most compatible and portable way to keep your style guide is probably just a markdown file that you drag into the chat or use as a project source. But I think at some point, we will just have to accept that there will always be signs that AI had some hand in our work if we decide to use it. I learned to accept the M- from a human. I can learn to tolerate it from an LLM. We are leveraging technology to deliver better services and end results to our clients. Nobody thinks less of you for using a spreadsheet. Nobody is upset that the automation you built sends out the correct email with the correct information every time instead of using a human assistant who doesn't understand capitalization, complete sentences, or how to spell a client's name properly. I have made peace with the fact that there's a lot of content out there under the Rosen Institute branding with M-dashes in it, AI or not. And in the interest of full disclosure, I did not use AI to script this podcast. If I had, it probably would have figured out a more graceful way to wrap this up, but I'm afraid you are stuck with whatever I could muster, which is a bit of an existential question. Would I prefer a podcast written by AI or by a guy who thinks hot dogs have faces and butts? I'm Ned Days, and that's your tech tip. And now for your moment of concise advice. When I walked through the door to first interview at the Rosen Law Firm, the first thing I noticed was the water feature in the lobby. Ooh la la, aren't we fancy big city attorneys? And then when I started working there, I couldn't help but notice the motorized shoe shiner in the back office for staff. Talk about being full of themselves, these people might as well have been lighting cigars with $100 bills, or so I thought. But what really took the cake was when it was decided after the purchase of a few pieces of art that what we needed was an interior designer to come in and rearrange the furniture. Up until this point, when furniture needed rearranging, a couple of us would just drag stuff around until we were satisfied because I couldn't imagine there was much more to furniture arranging than that. But lo and behold, we weren't just getting any designer. A guy who used to be on the old HGTV show Trading Spaces lived in town and did interior design, so he was going to turn up and set us straight. And I thought this was the most ridiculous thing I had ever heard. We are going to pay someone to tell us where to put our chairs. This topped the water feature, and it certainly topped the shoe shiner. I was ready for an Emperor's New Clothes moment where everything looked exactly the same, but I was embarrassingly wrong in being so dismissive. This guy walked into our main office and just started shifting things around. He didn't bring in new furniture. He didn't repaint. He rearranged what we already had, and it was like a completely different office. It was the same room, the same stuff, and it looked like a different space. It felt different. It felt intentional and professional in a way that our amateur furniture dragging never achieved. It was like the difference between me trying to fix my car versus taking it to a mechanic. I might eventually get the job done, but the mechanic is going to see things that I can't even identify. And that's what this designer did. He saw the room in a way that we were literally incapable of seeing it. After that, we ended up using him to outfit our other offices and executive suites from the ground up. We let him loose on the space. He bought the furniture, the art, the knickknacks, everything. And what was even more surprising here is that we spent less, significantly less than we used to furnishing a space. All of those years buying our own furniture through the traditional office supply companies, we had been paying more than twice what he was charging us for better looking stuff and to get it all delivered and set it up. We thought we were saving money by doing it ourselves. We were doing exactly the opposite. The offices that he set up looked better than anything else in those complexes. The clients noticed, staff noticed, visitors noticed, and it wasn't because we were spending more. It was because we stopped pretending that we knew what we were doing, and we let somebody who actually had the skill handle it. Now, I know that these days a lot of people aren't sitting in traditional office spaces anymore. Maybe you are working from home, maybe you are at a co-working space, maybe you are at the kitchen table because that's all that works right now. All of that is fine, but your environment still matters, and it probably matters more than you think. I have a tiny condo that I use as a rental property. When my wife and I first moved to the US, we stayed there for a couple of months while we looked for a house. My wife absolutely hated it. It depressed her. It felt dark and constrictive, and honestly it was. The place is under 700 square feet, and we put zero effort into making it feel like anything other than a box with a bed in it. Neither of us has any design sense, so we just lived with it. We rented out to a young woman who clearly has an eye for this stuff, and I've had to go over there a few times to let contractors in, and it is a completely different space. It's obviously the same square footage, the same layout, but it feels open and warm and intentional. If it wasn't such a weird request, I would probably ask her to come do our house. There's a reason people pay to have their homes staged before they sell them. The space doesn't change, the perception of the space changes. And the perception drives our decisions. It drives how clients feel when they walk through the door. It drives how you feel when you sit down to work in the morning. It drives whether your team feels like they work somewhere that takes itself seriously. And this isn't entirely about furniture. It's about recognizing what you aren't good at and being willing to ask for help, even when it feels silly, maybe especially when it feels silly. Paying somebody to rearrange your chairs sounds absolutely ridiculous right up until you see the result. You don't have to renovate, you don't have to spend a fortune, but look around wherever you are working right now and ask yourself if it is helping you or just existing around you. If your home office is a folding table in the corner of a bedroom, maybe it's worth an afternoon and a couple $100 to make it somewhere you actually don't mind doing work. And if you have a proper office where clients visit, get a professional involved, not the person in your office who has good taste, an actual designer. It's going to cost less than you think. You will probably spend less on furniture than you're spending now, and you'll end up with a space that makes a substantially better impression on people when they walk in. And once you've done that, think about what else seems too trivial to get professional help with and ask whether or not it's worth a shot. It doesn't matter how small the practice, a bookkeeper can probably make a world of difference in terms of quality and speed at which the accounting and reporting is happening. We paid somebody to manage our plants, which again I thought sounded silly, but the time, energy, and money it would have taken me or somebody else on staff to water and replace and maintain those would have been astronomical compared to paying a pro. Just because it seems silly at first blush doesn't mean it isn't making a huge impact. That's your moment of concise advice. Wrapping up from Jacksonville, thank you for joining us today. Never forget that what you are doing is important work. Small, consistent steps focusing on marketing, management, and technology are how we build better firms. And you are 1 week closer to the practice you deserve. Until next time, I'm Ned Days.
Thanks for listening to Your Law Firm. Subscribe to the Friday File at roseninstitute.com and join thousands of other lawyers who are working on instead of in their businesses. You'll find safe, successful, actionable approaches for transforming your practice. Join us today at roseninstitute.com.